Yeah, when I need a little bit of inspiration. So Chris is the chair of Design Informatics at the University of Edinburgh. I think you're leading the New Futures Institute.
Yeah, changing jobs slightly, but
But I'll hand over to you now, and really enjoying this. I'm
great.
Very excited to see what all of this stuff is.
Thank you. You'll have seen the best bits, to be honest, Kathy. You know all the greatest hits. Hey, folks, really nice to see you. I mean, to be here, right? Thanks for Kathy for letting me come. I'm trying to be on a sabbatical, and in theory, I'm supposed to have this research leave, which takes you away. But COVID, as well as other people trying to exploit your diary after COVID, makes it tricky. So the chance to get out and come here has been a real treat. So, and to do it in person is good. And I've got some treats for those in the room. I've got some NFTs to give out. So if you're in the room, sorry folks, you get an extra treat. So let's just get going then and see if this works. So just for context, I did fine art actually, but I'm a designer. So what do I mean by that? So I work in between the schools of informatics and the design school, really trying to construct spaces or places or research projects that negotiate ideas of what it is to be human, caught up, entangled in what some people call the digital economy, but it's a place in which value and values, as we know, are deeply contested now, whether it's through influences, whether it's through practice and making. And we're blessed with some really interesting facilities. This is a bit of a lockdown video now, which is a slight shame. But we have a nice master's studio, a big master's program actually, where making is developed through programming software, but also through quite a little groovy maker space, which is just through those doors. And you probably saw the gallery at the start. So in some ways, this is just me scene setting. At the start of every great movie, there's the establishing shot, which I'm using to say, look, you're not going to get hardcore cryptography this morning. You're going to get design, you might get objects, and hopefully, not many, but you'll see some humans wrestling with the implications of what blockchain decentralized distributed ledgers are doing, or potentially can do. And I have to do the credit screen because although it's very small, I do bits on here, right? But actually, it's just a really interesting team of people. If you can read it, you'll spot some anthropologists, you might spot interaction designers, you might spot ethicists. But design informatics tries to be that place where we accept that there isn't one dominant discipline. I see it through a design lens, but many others see it through an STS or a social science lens, and economists and the like as well. So this entanglement through design and informatics is proving very rich, and I suppose rich because it's allowed us then to perhaps tap up particular research councils in the UK where we, as a sponsor slide, we began to draw down money to let us to do design by blockchain by design, thinking through the materiality, the experience of it all. Now, having said that, Kathy's probably done a slide like this, which is whatever I'm about to show you. It's fun, but if you haven't gone down the rabbit hole yet, and you haven't got your wallets, just be mindful, be careful. We've got many students, even my son, who just jumps in, thinking it's a quick pump or dump moment, and then making money. And that's not really, I think, why Kathy and I engage in it. It's far more complex, interesting ideas. But nevertheless, I think we have some great things to show you. But on the other hand, it might encourage you to go and get a wallet and just get some Ether or Tezos, and you might get burnt. So if you do go down it, just get advice, get for those who've been burnt, but also perhaps understand what the cultural communities are trying to do in this space. So that's my warning slide. You won't get many. So I suppose trying to set a theoretical context for this. And this came out probably 2015, 2016, when we did see the rise of Bitcoin, I'll be blunt, at that point, certainly the rise of Bitcoin as this other digital economic proposition. And it began to ask us to ask questions of what it might do. Perhaps questions which are perhaps more theoretical than practical or technical, but what does it mean? And we ask this simple question, that if you change the representation of value from sterling, from euros, and the dominant representations of value, which are often economic, there are lots of other representations. Kathy just bought me a nice coffee. It's a perfectly good representation of value. And it allowed us to connect in various ways. It gave me a good shot as well. But the dominant representation of value is often the economic fiat currency. If data cultures are changing that, and if Bitcoin's part of that shift, not just because it's developed through a ledger, not just because it develops a scarcity, but if it does it allow us to change the values that you can represent? And a simple way I think of, if I think of what do you mean? Well, I mean that maybe if there is a vegetarian coin, which is loaded with the values associated with being away from meat, or a sustainable coin that says it's away from carbon, that restricts its spending. I can't walk in to McDonald's and spend it. In the same way I can't walk to McDonald's with my sterling and spend it. So really, we're asking questions around what strings can get attached, what values-based strings can get attached if you change the representation of value from a fiat currency, which is utterly fungible within its space, within its country, but also it only has well, in my country, it has a queen and a number on the back. That's all it has. If you then start associating with lots of other values, which you do through metadata, if you like, then you begin to start associating these cultural, social, quite important environmental values with the transactions. And what does that mean? What does that allow us to shift? So that's one of the questions I'll keep coming back to. What happens? And that isn't specific, of course, to distributed ledger technology. It's just a way of beginning to think that, wow, as designers, I think for the first time in a long time, I have design material in crypto, in blockchains, that really allows me to ask hard questions of the digital economy. Many other things that designers have had to do are actually, from the development of iPhones through the development of paper and print, hang off a reliance of fiat currencies. And I don't actually have a material, technical, social dialogue. Does that make sense? So even in the Internet of Things, I can begin to push and pull on the role of data in lifestyles, and we do some of that. But still, the value of the data doesn't really become a material. I just possibly, at worst case, we just give it away, rather like this Zoom. If we're not careful, Zoom are mediating, could be an intermediary in this technology, this space here, and they could be doing things with my face. So I like that intervention. I suppose, again, I get the theory out of the way, but what it means is that it asks questions around your and my economic imaginaries. So now, and this is where I think the big turn is, when I think of what Kathy describes as blockchain being a big thought experiment. It's a tremendous thought experiment because it asks us questions around what our imaginaries are of economic processes. Now, an imaginary, it's a term from social science. I think this chap, Jessup, does really well. In some ways, it's a way of knowing the world. But it means that according to your positionality, your place in the world, the way you know the world is different for all of you, okay? He tries to describe it by splitting it into two parts, which then become connected at the bottom. The world is complex, we all know that. And there's something that you do on the left, which is the sense and meaning making. So I had to get from the hotel over to here this morning, and I could have done a number of things. Now, I'm a white middle-class academic from UK, paid reasonably well. I could have got a taxi. I happened to walk, because I thought I can burn off some of last night's calories. I had lots of options. I didn't have a helicopter as an option. I didn't have a chauffeur as an option. Other people, when they think of the sense and meaning making, the doors, the handles, the world that they can use to get jobs done is limited by how you've made sense of the world. Does that make sense? So every morning you get up, you don't question the fact, I haven't got a helicopter. It's not fair. You just get on the train or the bus. If you're lucky, you might have a car. Does that make sense? So there's a very practical, situated sense of making sense of the world. On the other hand, you have this other imaginary, which speaks of the systems that are out there, where I think we have we don't have a very right-wing government in the UK, but we have a certain right-of-centre government. So when I'm also reading the BBC News, finding out that Boris Johnson and the Chancellor have both broken laws for the first time in history, I'm also building an imaginary around what is happening, what level of, not corruption, but a level of kind of dishonesty is occurring through society. So he talks about this really structuration of the world. And sometimes it might ask me down the bottom, when I put those things together, how come Richie Sunak's wife didn't pay tax? Millions of pounds for the last 10 years, and I've just been paying it, and I see it in my paycheck. So when you put those things together, you then build an imaginary, and that's where you begin to get conflict occurring. And if we think about economic imaginaries then, at various points in time, you'll find that the euro will have been your experience of the euro, the taxes you pay or the fees you pay, or the things that you earn are either good or bad or stressed because of your sense of the world. And you think, therefore, it's not compatible. It's not fair. Oh, I had a good year. Does that make sense? And all of us have different grasps of what that means in the middle when it crunches together. And when we only lock into one type of fiat currency, we end up with quite problematic ways out of that. So you don't tend to see possibilities. And I think what's interesting with the crypto space, not just because of the money that's inflated, but the way it's began to build NFT communities to some extent, where we think about DAOs. Actually, all of those ideas are starting to ask questions of what could be possible. Does that make sense? So that's where I get excited, that if you leave behind the fiat and you go through into this thought space, even if you don't invest or buy, you suddenly start to see new models of governance. New models potentially of representing different communities. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of problems with it, don't get me wrong. But for a moment, it offers me a space to think, oh, maybe I could get things done on the left differently, because it's not restricted by this fiat. I hope that makes sense. That's the imaginary piece. And I think it means that when we think about what you want to do, I mean, what do you want to do, folks? After everything, my hunch is that gamers want to be involved in games. I think foodies probably want to be involved in food. What is it you want to do? At the moment, I think, because of the imaginary, we think that money's in the middle. When actually, it's not the product that gets in the way. What we want to do is do those things. Gamers don't want to buy games, they just want to play games. Actually, foodies don't want to buy food. They want to make, eat, get involved in it. And that means we begin to change, again, this representation of the money, the value, that somehow becomes this transactional thing. And it stops being cultural. So when we go back to this, if we can think about reorganizing the opportunities of how we make sense of the world, and then we think how the world is governed, we then begin to think about other possibilities. Now, again, so that's the kind of theoretical space that I like and think that's why I get excited. That's why you'll see some of the design interventions as being, it's not just about the crypto, the investment space, it actually changes and it rewires governance, power, representations of value, the potential to introduce values into a place where I don't have the queen on the back, where I don't have these dominant imaginaries offered to me. I suppose the last thing to say as I step toward blockchain is that many of you, I can't tell, are probably born in the 20th century, and there's still this idea that we're left over with a huge modern project through the 20th century, which essentially scaled up the production of things globally. Globalization was the 20th century project, wasn't it? It was enormous and incredibly successful. To be able to drive Japanese cars or German cars or Portuguese cars, wherever, anywhere on the planet. It brings us all this technology at scale. Many things in this room were not made locally. And that means they've had to make value, this representation of value, was actually decided by other people and then pushed along a value chain. So while I say that it's really interesting to buy Coke or soft drinks, actually the market space isn't that big. There aren't that many soft drinks I can go into a bar later and buy. I don't know if that's occurred to you, but wow, I can buy soft drinks. Well, actually I can fit them on an A4 sheet of paper because of the global project that pushed the value. Now, having said that, that scales the production, right? I wouldn't want to start a Coke factory now, or a Fanta factory. I'd much prefer to start a software company. Go to the bank now and say, I want to start a company. If you say you're going to stand up a factory to produce a product which you own the value proposition of and you push it, they're going to say you're joking. Should have done it 50 years ago, mate, when we were in the 20th century. Because now we're talking about value being caught up, not in a line where someone has the privilege of pushing it, because I don't see those products going away soon. They're still going to pour vast amounts of marketing in and push them at you. And you're going to have to say, no, I want a local soft drink, please. You're going to have to work quite hard to get off that particular conveyor belt. But in the digital economy, things begin to shift. Suddenly you've got a whole bunch of connected actors, which might involve you as a human and a company. And it might be that you can find something regionally made or socially made or environmentally made, and you can begin to negotiate. And any of those digital economies are connected. Now, they're connected by data, so you have to be conscious all the time, don't you, that you're passing data all the time, because the representation of value in these places is often not money. It's dominated by the passage of data, and your data is scraped and passed, just like the Zoom activity here as well. And we don't quite know what the value is. I think it's a social value. You give me, really weirdly, a privilege to rant at you for half an hour or so, which is kind of weird, because I'm not sure you want. In these spaces, it's not as easy, because, that's interesting. Of course, you also don't quite, you think those dots might be human, but we also know they're probably mediated by AIs, machine learning, trying to look for your identity from the past, your data footprint, to then identify a value proposition. Kathy wants espressos. I've seen her buy them before. Let's go at her. So you also know it's interesting because it's networked, but it's also complicated because it's networked. It also is very leaky. The value chain in which Coca-Cola decide that they want to stay in the market and they pour more money into marketing than into the machinery now and push it, it doesn't leak. I mean, forgeries, I don't think I've ever drank a forgery, a forged Coke. I've certainly had supermarket Cokes, and I've had lots of others, but it's never been a fake Coke. I might be wrong though. Right? In here, you have lots of leakage because the data can be moved, sold, and passed around. So again, value is created very differently. In theory, it's co-created because you're beginning to find, and they're always listening, whoever they is, about what you want. So in theory, there's a co-creation. There's no co-creation with Coke. Coke aren't asking me what I think. They might have Twitter on the back, but they're only going to use it to market and push. So of course, that type of diagram speaks entirely to the old DARPA diagram from the 1960s, I think, in which RAND, the RAND organisation, Research and Development, proposed to the US government that actually, in terms of military resilience, you're very exposed during the Cold War to a centralised system. A centralised system is very exposed under attack because you knock out the middle node, everything's down. Have a think about a distributed, possibly decentralised, but still more vulnerable to a very resilient network model. And of course, that segues perfectly to what we know to then becoming the blockchain. Because, of course, you know, and your generation have been through this disintegration or redevelopment of network things through that digital economy piece. So if I jump from here, you know that the Amazon digital economies, you know the Google digital economies, you know the Zoom digital economies, all look like that. And they stripped down and torn apart. Let's think of the sectors. Transport through Uber and Lyft. We think about Amazon and books and the decentralization of book selling. And then, of course, finally through banking. And I'm sure you can probably think of others, whether it's Deliveroo, so on and so forth. But they've all moved to something which is very distributed. And yeah, this is a 2014 screen grab, which I'm just really pleased I took. I was sitting in a lecture theatre in London, probably in Imperial, funnily enough. Yeah, and I was trying to get my head around it. I said, what the fuck is this thing? What? They're talking about it. Even people are buying this stuff. And I just thought, I'm just going to screen grab it. And I didn't know its value then, but it's been really helpful because it does allow you to see in real time, which is really hard to track now across any blockchain representation, and it'll keep doing it. But these are all the real-time transactions, represented, funnily enough, in dollars. I don't know why. They might be now represented perfectly well in Bitcoin, but at the time it was represented in dollars. And you can see all the transactions in real time across a distributed ledger, and at the very top you can see, you can't see very well, but you'll be able to see in the recording, the blocks, the incremental blocks that every 10 minutes or so, miners are proving, confirming, and through consensus are agreeing that there's no corruption, there's no double spending in this particular space. So for me, it's like, wow. So if you ever get a moment where you don't understand something, think about screenshotting it, because it's a moment now I just can't not go back to in terms of explaining a very simple way of how the blockchain works. I'm going to come back to this a little bit in illustrations, because the way that those blocks, that immutable record, I mean, it's a list that you can't change. So it's just a list you can't change. But what's useful about a list that you can't change lends itself to certain possibilities. Here it's fascinating, in a relative form of transparency, not complete transparency, I can follow on some instances where some transactions take place. I can drill down and pursue and follow some of the Bitcoin, which of course I can't do on my HSBC. I still hear, I'm not sure it's true or not, there's more corruption in the very closed private ledgers owned by the HSBC compared to the semi-transparent nature of the blockchain. So, of course, I don't know what's being bought here. That could be drugs, that could be something much darker, which is equally worrying, but nevertheless, there's something that drew me to that idea that, okay, it's a list that I can't change, but everyone can see, and collectively we're finding ways to make digital assets scarce, and also to perhaps some level of distribution that's not one of you or me own the actual ledger. So, my guess is you know this stuff, but it takes me back to this question then. So, if those are characteristics of value representation, how can you change the values? So we're now going to jump into the project work really, and just scamper through some of the ways that we do it, and then hopefully again extend this question through the case studies. I won't dwell long on the workshop, but as designers we do this with people. The only way we've ever known to ask questions around the technology is to build things for you, with you, and then listen and watch and learn. We do it through two modalities really. We do it through we do it through workshops, which include using Lego. Here we build blocks and then we seal them, literally, in towers. And you can see that people have written their credentials or their signatures onto these little pieces of the stickers, which allow them to say, I signed it, you signed it, and then we'll place it within the blockchain. And there's 3 blocks being built there and sealed. So we run things like that, which is quite a helpful way to help people go on a journey. Curiously, in that particular example, what we begin to start doing is trading material assets like sheep, oil, wood, and then slowly, as we go through the blocks, we ask people to take away the thing that they're trying to buy and then think about the service that they want. And that's where that moment comes of saying, you don't want money. You don't. You just want healthcare. You don't actually want university products. You just want learning. And when you start taking away the money by going through a blockchain, you always begin to see, I could reconstruct services by working with money completely differently. So that works super well. Now, again, we've had to flip online, so we do a Miro version of that. So if you ever want to have a go at a Miro thing, ping me, and we can run one. We also then begin to flip it into smart contracting. And again, designers use this language of body storming. As well as brainstorming, we like to use the body to make sense of the world. We went off to Amsterdam and literally sprinkled Bitcoin in the streets by associating a Bitcoin wallet using a software called Electrum, it's quite old, with a GPS coordinate. And we ran little smart contract scripts. And then we gave you wallets on your phone. If you walk into a black dot, you will be transferred the Bitcoin. It was the year of Pokemon Go. So everyone was very ready to chase and run around after things. So we borrowed that body storming approach and flipped it into GeoCoin. We also had a couple of the red circles are where you could then have a smart contract over time. If Chris stays in this place for too long, keep taking away money. If you're on that bridge, it's really tough. Because if you stay on the bridge for too long, if you're a single parent with 2 kids and 2 cats and 2 dogs, and you're moving slowly, you will get fined. If you're in a car and you're on your way to work in a Tesla, you're out of it. So what we began to do with these contracts is then build economic imaginaries. And some of them are quite dark, where people would, I'll show you. Then we flipped this, we moved it into Ether. Bitcoin was costing us a fortune, just giving it away. Then we flipped it into Ether. That started costing us a fortune. And when either way, it's going to cost us gas to pay for the transaction, or it's just going to give money away. And very generous designers are, keep giving this away. But what we did in the end was we run it now, and I can take you to the website if you're interested. Oops, Daisy, sorry. I can show you. So we now run it as a fake. So, but it works just as well. So here, this is me. I've got a balance of 7.5. I'm caught in a debit zone. So you can't quite see that, but that number's zooming down. I'm stuck in a zone here. Actually, we're not using a blockchain. We're just using a very basic database, but it mimics the principles. And we have a web interface which allows you to put contracts out into a street, so you can do it later if you like. But what's interesting is it allows you to change and organise, either in a crude way, the incentives of why people move through cities, or if you're imaginatives, rewire some of the business models to support fairness. So it's been quite playful. I'll give you some examples. So this was using the Electrum version. 3 city planners flipped the representation of value from being money into votes, which again is an example of if you change the representation of value, what does it change? So this group said that, hang on, this isn't about the money. Well, it is. Let's pretend Amsterdam City Council have decided to flip 200,000 euros into their money, their capital money, which is going to be spent on roads, schools, capital, and they're going to flip it into a crypto, and they're going to give you access to it, but you can't take it out. But you can vote on it. So what happens here is you all get a local coin, and all you're doing is moving through the street, and every time you move into a red area, we're going to move a vote. So in the old example, you would have been fined. So this person looks like they're being fined. No, it's not money, they're votes. So when you vote, you're not being fined, you're just giving something away, values. And this person is spending most of their fractions of digital coin or votes in those areas, but we also allow them to go up to another area. If they hit the blue piggy bank, they can choose to instantiate a new geofence and add, I want bicycle stands here. So all they're doing is participatory budgeting. They're literally moving money around someone else's ledger because they have power, they have a wallet, the places have wallets. So that was like, wow, they did it. If you change the representation of value, because money isn't seen as a vote. We're so obsessed with money being one thing. And actually, it's a figment of our imaginaries. It could be doing much more for us. So I'm hoping I'm hanging on to that thesis here for you. This is an example where we then gave it to, actually we gave it to a bank in the UK, a starter bank called Tesco Bank, which is a supermarket with a bank. And here we ran exactly the same. So there's 2 groups. What I really liked about this group is they were trying to rewire cinemas. So the business model of cinema, I guess it's the same here, is that you only get 1 ticket. You might get tickets for students, or me, or my parents, but essentially, you just get trailers. You can't choose which trailers. It's quite a linear product, quite a linear value proposition, actually. So in this instance, they had 2 people going to the cinema. Him, and he doesn't want to watch the trailers. So what you can see is, there's a green, he's about to buy his ticket to the cinema. So he buys his ticket now, and it's gone, so he's been debited. The other team are going to enter those green circles, and they're actually represent trailers. Now, if Laura tweets or comments, she's actually going to be paid back, because the trailers are just marketing devices. So actually, let's credit her for being, whether she likes it or not, it doesn't matter. It just helps a feedback loop, data, occur between the trailers, which are really digital devices when we go into the cinema. When they go to your YouTube, wow, that's when the trailers are currency within a value constellation. Here, they're out of, so they're trying to make them work. The other guy didn't pay for the trailers, he's not interested in trailers, but you never get the offer, do you? I'd like to skip the trailers, please. It's never in the product, it's never in the proposition. Anyway, they're now entering the main feature. At this point, my wife says, remind everyone there's no cinema. Because they keep thinking there might be a cinema, and I keep forgetting. It's just a business model. But what they're doing is body storming a business model out in the streets, which I thought, wow, how do you do that? So they watch the movie together. Laura leaves, but she picks up her Coke crap, and she dumps it, and she gets kicked back as well, because she saved another person doing another job. I forget who the other guy's name is. This guy writes a review. I mean, it's probably a bit rare that you would write a review. But Jeff stays in, writes a review, and he gets a kickback. So everyone pays a different price because the value is different according to your interests. So again, I'm not sure it's perfect. I'm slightly worried it's a business model approach to smart contracting. But what was great was you just tear down the idea that you're not buying cinema tickets, you're trying to think about the services, the experiences that you want, and you reorganize them. So yeah, we do that again on a Miro thing. So if at any point you want to ask for an experience, and I can show you later, we can go and put some GeoCoin out here. You can have a go at just hacking it. We also do self-sovereignty, so we're very keen on what it means if value is voting. So in blockchain, actually, you do have to do a lot of work. You either have to be a miner, or if you're thinking of through to, in this context, we decided that Edinburgh hasn't got enough good pizzas. So how do you build a DAO to start allowing a community to own its own economy? And in this, there's lots of work people are doing to validate, to prove, and it's very, very, very physical, very tangible. There's stickers which are all encoded, and there are stamps, and it works through. And then the last one we're working on with the Bank of England is, there's a moment all of your big central banks are going to have to make a jump, because it's just this cash idea is just kind of not working. I mean, it's a challenging one because it works for many people who do need cash, but it's also a problem because actually, if you've got NFTs or if you've got crypto, you're not paying taxes, and it probably isn't fair. To be in the end, it's probably not fair. So they're going to have to think about how they do CBDCs, as they're called. So we do lots of design thinking for them, and then at the moment we're helping them out with stories. What might it be like for Anna to actually think about having a digital cash? And by digital cash, I mean at the moment, you can take your cash out of the bank and put it under your bed, but not many of you do it. So what might it be like? Because at the moment, all of your cash at the moment, as long as it's digital, is kind of under surveillance. Whether it's in any of the banks, it's all under levels of surveillance. If regulation changes and your banks begin to open up your bank accounts to other third parties, which they're starting to do, with your permission, it's called open banking, your bank accounts become your databases. And I can find really quickly what you buy, just by running simple machine algorithms saying, oh, you spent £83.40 in a supermarket. I can quickly run an algorithm to say, well, there's only so many products that add up to that. That means you must have bought a coffee, a tea, some cheese, and some milk. You're that type of person.
Nana.
So, so very quickly, your bank accounts, which you think is an imaginary, are actually sealed credit and debit spaces. They're not. They're your personal databases. I know more about your activity and your personality through your expenditure there than you do about your Google accounts. So suddenly, we need to get a handle on this, because your bank accounts will become the next place for attack. Does that make sense? I think it's terrifying. Anyway, right, so that's the other stuff. The other thing I want you to do, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind some help, because I'm going to show you some things now. And at some point, I wouldn't mind you, if you do any blockchain stuff, critiquing them. So I can show you this later, but if you get a chance, take a picture of the hat, and it will take you, I'm going to pay you back, it's work, I promise, but I'm going to pay you back with an NFT. I'm going to give you an NFT each. And that will take you to a Miro board. I presume you might know what a Miro board is. I'm going to quickly show you. So, and this is where I honestly do, I'm going to pay you, but I'm just going to jump out and show you. So what I've been doing in Miro is starting to draw diagrams of what I think the blockchain is doing. So in a minute, I'm going to show you how we marry people onto the blockchain. I'm going to show you that. And by this, and next to it, you'll see it. I'm going to show you a diagram of what I think is happening. But I'm not sure they're right. So it might be a bit of homework. You don't have to do this. But if you get a chance, I'd like to know by you dragging the post-its on saying it makes sense or it doesn't. Because there's not many people drawing pictures of blockchain services that make sense to me, my mum, my dad, or my kids. There aren't. Lots of computer systems, lots of cryptographers are writing them or drawing them. It doesn't make any sense to you or me. So, have a look at those. It'd be great if you can, but no stress. Right, let me show you what these things are then, what I'm talking about. So, what we do now then is try and build experiences or products. So, one example is that we do try to marry people on the blockchain. And why not? Because in some ways, if I'm going to take you on a journey into smart contracting, actually, maybe I need to go back to what you also know, which is getting married. Now, I'm not sure if you care for getting married. Some people just don't care for it anymore. It's a very old idea of binding two people together. And hopefully you have contemporary ideas. It doesn't have to be a man and a woman. It can be lots of different types of people. But nevertheless, it's quite an interesting cultural imaginary to disrupt. So these two began to think about GeoCoin, the smart contracting app, as a way of thinking, well, shall we just get married? Because these guys can't get married very quickly. I mean, certainly this is pre many of the modern partnerships we have in the UK. So they then developed the turn on the GeoCoin to say, okay, if two people are in one place at one time, we'll instantiate a smart contract that says those people are bound together. Now, if I go to the bank and try and marry Zhao, it's going to be really... Or I go to the church and do it this afternoon. My wife might ring you up. The church might worry, who's this guy? Now, in the same way, you can begin to build smart contract relationships, partnerships, or joint accounts, or marriages, super quick. So, for example, if I go to the pub later with Zhao, it would be very quick to do, jump into the same space, initiate a shared joint account between us, we spend out, and maybe the algorithm looks at my spending power, which I'm a tenured professor, might be more than, I mean, you might be earning a fortune on Bitcoin, I don't know. But I might earn more than Zhao. So in some ways, it will then figure out the algorithm, and we'll both pay a fair price. And as soon as we leave, the joint account will be dissolved, and it will be gone. I can't do that this afternoon with Zhao at a bank. I can't set up a joint account and go for a beer and then kill the joint account. It's going to take hours. So suddenly they start thinking about these marriages as being ways of helping the public, you, think about what a joint account could do quickly. So we've been marrying people on the blockchain. So it's a 5-minute marriage. If your phones, and we have phones at the end of this location. So the location is clearly fixed. 2 smartphones, 2 iPhones. You decide to marry me or not. You put your name in, and we do it in the Edinburgh Festival, we've done it in London, and it's really uncomfortable for people. You often don't like it because it's not sense and sense-making that you know. And it's been wonderful watching people's faces. It's a 5-minute marriage. It's not legally binding. It's in the blockchain permanently. And we're going to use Bitcoin to pay it off. And people get super worried. And they get worried because of the church, their parents. If you meet a boyfriend and a girlfriend and you ask them, they get, no, I don't really want to marry her. Why are you asking? This is too much. And all of these imaginaries come to the surface around the idea of contracts. So we do this an awful lot, and it really worries people, but we quite like the fact that it worries people. Because that, I think, demonstrates the imaginaries you have, cultural and economic. You get a receipt, you can divorce within the 5 minutes. So lots of people, okay, we'll do it. And then one of them hits the divorce button. And it's great, you see this moment. We did it in London, and this was uncomfortable for some, where a dad married his youngest daughter on the blockchain. They don't, the two sisters love it. They're a little party. But when I show it to some people in some lecture halls, people are, shouldn't be doing that. Fuck it, it's just a game. It's just playing with assumptions around the imaginaries. And what is the value being represented here? Well, it's probably care and family. and it's okay, and it's only 5 minutes. But it's really odd how you do these things. So, again, on that Miro, what I've done is try to draw it very simply. You know you've got these incremental blocks. All that's happening is two people are writing onto a smart contract, and that's placing it within a block. And that's immutable, and you can't change it. So if you can, have a look and see what I'm getting wrong. What I'm not doing in these little diagrams is representing the mining. So it doesn't say proof of work or proof of stake. I'm not. And I don't think people will care about that in the end. I think us as consumers just want to get jobs done. But you might say it would help if you proved how those things, you might say that. So anyway. All right, another one, we're quite keen on smart contracting, is helping you understand what the smart contract is. So there was a smart contract there. If two people in the same location, let's write it into the blockchain. We also try to build things to help people understand. So this is Jonathan just talking through the seismic seesaw. This is a £1 coin. It goes into a cog, and the machine is connected to the internet. If somewhere on the planet, listening to a trusted third party, there is an earthquake, then that cog will turn to the right. And he started a 5-minute smart contract, you probably saw that. In 5 minutes, if there's an earthquake, we'll pay the money to Oxfam. If there isn't, it'll turn to the left. So in this instance, there was no earthquake within those 5 minutes, and I got my money back. So that's just a smart contract. And I think what's quite helpful in the context of blockchain is who is your trusted third party. So we trusted the American Geological Association, which seemed to be a network of scientists of which the instruments are very well calibrated. Having said that, it is American, so I have to be mindful that there's probably not earthquakes in North Korea. And if you want to represent different societies, maybe I need to lean into another. Anyway, you can see the problems. Who do you trust to validate a smart contract? We then flipped it into more of these. So these are more of these physical smart contracts which help consumers, you and I, understand what's going on. There's the old seesaw, but we also have in the UK a national lifeboat. And lifeboats are launched all the time. There's a lot of suicide, people jumping into waters, it's a tricky time, mental health being challenged. Every time we have a tweet from the RNLI, the Lifeboat Association, then we move money in. So it's another smart contract. If we get the tweet that there's been a call out, then we'll move money in. So beginning to think about how a smart contract can build resilience for charities. How do you begin to be responsive? The last one is, which I'll come back to later, is when you write down a hashtag. So here in this one, if you write down, and that was our project, but if you wrote down clean energy, if someone tweets on clean energy, move money from your bank account into a clean energy funder. See if we can nudge the social activity of tweeting. What's the representation of value? It's a tweet. Let's back it with money. So how do you move all your influencing and what you like into policy change? Money might be good to change policy. So having shown those as physical smart contracts, we then ran a project which has just been launched again in Australia, which is how to flip that into an app. So this is in the market now, actually. You can download this, and it allows you to then write a contract with earthquakes, or lots of things actually. Here I'm going to set up an earthquake contract. I've got lots of choices, but I'm going to build my own, which is not very well on this projector, but I can set up a contract. If there's an earthquake anywhere somewhere on the planet over 3.5 on the Richter scale, in Asia, Antarctica, Africa, Oceania, and South America, I've missed out Europe and North America. And my total offer is 5 Australian dollars, but I'll make it gradual. So in other words, every time it takes place, I'll pay out 50 cents. So actually, I'm banking on 10, up to 10 earthquakes of up to 3.5. And then I can sign that, and that then gets sealed on the blockchain. That's immutable. I can't welch on the deal, I can't get out of the deal. I've put the money into an escrow, so it's safe. Then over here, this is what I then began to get. So it was created, it was insured, and I'll dive into an old one now. So this is me having signed one. I think I'm paying out 30 cents on this one. That's me signing the contract on the blockchain. It's sealed, can't go back. We gave people a 2-hour cooling off period. Each one of these contracts now is actually an earthquake. So it's kind of like a news feed. Earthquake 5.2 struck in the Russian Federation, pay the money out. So it's beginning to change, again, the representation of value from being, I've got money to give to Oxfam, the international charity. I'm actually beginning to give, based on data, I'm swapping data for money. And I'm beginning to, again, trying to change this representation of value. At the moment, you give money to charities, but I don't know what you think you're doing. You just trust them. So here we've got these validators trying to make sure you can trust the charity, but maybe you want to sense check that by validating it with someone else. It could be the recipient. You give £10 to an international charity. Does it reach the person you think is on the poster? How do you know? Actually, a lot of money gets skimmed off. How do you get there? So how do you put trust back in organisations? And maybe, it might be the case that blockchain can help. So here again, my diagram is that you are on the blockchain, your wallet, you have crypto on the blockchain over on the left, but you're going to pay into an escrow, and the escrow is this holding space, and it's the length of a smart contract that maybe lasts a period of time based on how many earthquakes, if they take place, it simply transfers the money over to someone else's wallet. So again, sense check these, I think they make sense. We've also, we quite like smart contracting. We think that helps you think about how you might change the representation of value. The other things that we've found is interesting is that you begin to start thinking that actually it occurred to us that things can have wallets. And this might be interesting because I wonder whether you think who should have wallets. Does your economic imaginary stretch to a tree having a wallet? Or are you deciding on the future of the tree by only you having wallets? Can more than humans have currency? Does the earthquake now have a stake in the world because I've said I'm listening to it? Whereas if your imaginaries say that no, only humans can have money, then, well, is that fair? So again, I like changing the representation of value because maybe the earth is where the buck stops. Maybe you and I will come and go, but the earth might be the thing that needs the biggest wallet. It might be the thing that we're just extracting from. We're just taking out of the wallet. So how do we give the earth a wallet? Well, the earthquakes might be one way of doing it if we change the representation of value. I know I repeat that all the time. So we were fascinated. What could you do if you began giving things around us wallets? This is an analog version. Well, it's a centralized database version. This uses the idea that we took 100 coffee cups to the Dutch Design Festival, and each coffee cup has a unique wallet. They've all got their own numbers, but when you put them, they have a bank account then, they have a wallet, and this one has no credit in its bank account, so you can't get coffee. However, if I put 2 of them onto this counter, this saucer, they both get credited. Now, each coffee cup has its own wallet, so I know when I got credit, and if I've got credit, it's green, I can take my green coffee cup now and go to the barista and spend out. So it's very binary. It's either got credit or it hasn't. But what's fun was that the representation of value began to change because these people who go off to this conference have to get coffee by finding someone else. Hey, do you want a coffee? We have to go and talk then. So suddenly the representation of value is talking. Now, you'll see later, and that felt weird. If you give something else the wallet, it can enforce and begin to disrupt social behaviour. I mean, it's tricky if you're shy, I confess. What was really interesting was, so all of these people were, and we also added a barista. It changes the representation of value of coffee, because it takes ages. This is about a 10-minute queue. Through there's free coffee. You just get a plunger. It's pretty crappy coffee, but it's completely free. You don't have to talk to anyone. You could just go and get a coffee and keep yourself. But we didn't want that. We wanted to produce a problem, like the marriage. We wanted to produce a problem that shifted the representation of value. Now, just briefly, interestingly, so one representation of value is it's bound to a social contract. We're going to force you into making friends. But why do you go to conferences? You kind of go to social network. So it's a contributor to the job to be done. The second thing is, in some ways, that we think about objects having bank accounts. How do they begin to disrupt the idea of the power relationships in the room? The barista, again, he made these crafted coffees. In fact, he was very arrogant. He wouldn't look you in the eye because his coffee was more valuable. So he built a scarcity compared to the room where you could just plunge it and it's fine. It's not bad. It was all right. But he built this weird scarcity. And then finally, the coffee cups. The coffee cups were commissioned and designed by a famous Scottish ceramicist called Katie West. People stole them because they're valuable. They're rare. There's only 100. Now I've got 98 because 2 people stole a rare Katie West. And it's got a maker's mark on the bottom as well. So again, so I'm wondering, there's no money represented here, but there's lots of value. And trying to find ways to elicit or expose and explore that in a network space was very helpful. So again, it's a centralized database. You could hack it. I owned the database, so I could keep crediting myself with coffee. That's the problem, right? You can't do that on the blockchain. So nevertheless, in the diagram, it just simply says there's a smart contract occurring here, which allows me to credit together, bound together, to then elicit value from the barista. Simple diagrams. But I'd like diagrams as a way of helping people understand the differences. Another one is the classic bit barista. Again, what happens if I give a coffee machine a wallet? What would that do? So in this one, this is Rory, who was the developer. He just wants a coffee. The coffee's on the internet, it's got a wallet, and it's going to buy the next set of coffee beans. So it has a wallet. It can go on and order from the internet. But the interesting thing is, it has to take a vote, though. So rather like a DAO, it's going to ask him to take a stake. Yes, you can get your coffee. You get what you want, Rory, but I need some advice. What do you, as a group, want me to buy? Cheap coffee, socially responsible coffee, environmentally responsible coffee, or a great taste, and we won't worry about the ethics. So it's a voting machine again. He doesn't think it is. He thinks it's a coffee machine, but actually it's a voting machine, and it might lean into different sustainable sources. So he buys his coffee, and it's probably cost him £75 worth of Bitcoin, but we won't tell him that. And actually, it returns him the vote, though, and it tells them, well, the group decided 34% of you voted to get socially responsible, so that's what I'm going to buy. So yeah, what is a coffee machine? Is it a voting? I know, repeat myself. The representation of value shifts completely because we do things in groups now to think about that which might be better for the group. And I think DAOs are going to, I need to do more DAO work because that idea that we start intervening and playing in governance systems in which power and money shift to voting opportunities, collective action, seem to be viable now. We had a very challenging space in DAOs a few years ago. So I think this is another, to critique it, but I think what's happening is a group of people at different points, probably different blocks, but I couldn't fit them in, are all buying coffee, but they're also being offered a vote. And that then enters a very simple smart contract, which simply, over a period of time, counts up the different votes and then organises the purchase of beans later on that chain. And someone else down here, who's the provider, has got a crypto wallet paying out. Again, what I like is in that smart contract space, we're adding voting back to that. This one I haven't done a drawing for, but I thought I should show you is what we're also trying to do is voting is a way of, what are we doing voting? We're trying to find out values, aren't we? We're trying to balance values across a space. Well, the same thing happens with energy. At the moment, there'll be a centralized approach in Portugal to balancing the energy demands. At certain times of the day, let's say 7 or 8 o'clock at night tonight, when people turn on their kettles and ovens, there'll be an imbalance of energy. And various people around, well, probably in a centralized network, will be deciding, let's keep the hydroelectricity and release the dams at 7 o'clock tonight to push more energy and balance the demand against the resource. If that makes sense. So again, it's fine, but you and I have a stake in this, right? You and I can decide whether to turn on the oven or the kettle, but that probably means we need to change the device. So we have a feedback loop, because at the moment you're just turning electricity on like it's water. You just think it's going to be there forever. It's not. Remember, we're taking out of the wallet, the Earth's wallet, we're just taking it out. So here we've developed 3 off-chain prototypes. So these are complete fakes, but they're quite good at taking the, telling the journey. Oh, is that the right one? No, it's not going to work, is it? That's funny. I took the video out, but simply, the one on the left allows you to trade on the spot. So you can buy energy and store it locally for a hairdryer, weird device, but we like it because it's connected with vanity. Do you need to blow dry your hair, guys and gals? Well, maybe you do, it's okay. It's a human, you're human, you can be human, it's okay. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, you can get up and use that hairdryer on the left and buy some cheap energy because you're balancing the grid. It's not 8 o'clock tonight when you need to do your hair. You buy it in advance and you sell it later when other people need to buy that energy off you. So you're trying to decentralize the balancing project. That's fine, but you don't want to get up at 4. So the next one says, well, install a smart contract on the device. And what will happen then is you enlist it to go and get you some energy of the type that you want, the values that you want. But it might be cheap energy, or it might be green energy. You write it into the code and it goes off. You press the button and it might take 3 minutes to buy you non-nuclear energy. But you feel good, and then you can blow dry your hair. So in that values game, it decides, but it's doing the labour for you. The last one says, actually, we don't trust you. You're awful. You've been awful. You keep pulling energy out of the planet like it's just water. You do. I do. It's shocking. It's in my hotel room. I've got 4 sockets in my hotel room. Go for it, Chris. Take as much as you want. So we just take the buttons away. You can't have any, actually, because what the machine is now going to do is ration you according to how much energy is in the network. If there isn't enough energy, you're going to have to wait. It will turn the blow dryer on, but according to the Earth's demands. So we quite like these 3. They're not on the blockchain. The other devices are, to an extent, on or off-chain. These are definitely off, they're fakes. But they help people think about what it might be like to play in those spaces. Great, so to finish off then, I'm going to just take you down the NFT rabbit hole, because I've brought some. We've just finished a show on NFTs. Has anyone got any NFTs? Okay, me and Kathy have got the NFTs. So you have a chance now to get your first NFT, because we've been working with a couple of Scottish artists, and just like all the previous projects, we wanted to take people on a journey about what a non-fungible token is. And a non-fungible token essentially is another exchange of the representation of value. Value which is perhaps, it's been a pixel for years, but suddenly the pixels become rare. Now you might have seen many of these things. They're the Bored Apes, the CryptoPunks. That's the artist, one of the artists we've worked with, Bastia. And it's good fun actually. It's a couple I bought for my kids at Christmas, trying to ask them questions. What an NFT is doing, but I'll give you a history, and then we'll perhaps have a little bit of a play and see if you want one. We'll see if you want one. So, just before I get to there though, let's think about what we mean with fungible and non-fungible, because I think this is about the very research question, which is changing the representation of value. So fungibility, and this is stolen words, but you know, I can get away with that, I'm on sabbatical. Fungibility implies that 2 things are identical in specification where individual units can be mutually substituted. For example, specific grades of commodities such as number 2 yellow corn are fungible because it does not matter whether corn was grown or corn designated with number 2 yellow corn is worth the same amount. Grow it in Portugal, grow it in the UK, they're just fungible. Commodities, common shares, options, and dollar bills or euros are all examples of fungible goods. So fungibility is that exchangeability, it's swappable. My euro in my pocket is the same as Kathy's. Now, funnily enough, so that's just fungibility. Another example of fungibility is money itself. A person A lends person B a $50 bill. It doesn't matter to person A if he is repaid with a different $50 bill. Wouldn't matter, would it? We swapped, Kathy and I swapped 50 euro, not that we've got them, euro bills. We wouldn't care. One might be tattier, but we probably trust them to be exchangeable for the goods that we want. Now, interestingly, in the same sense, person A can be repaid. So Kathy could give me two 20 euro bills and a 10. And I wouldn't mind. So the fascinating thing, in your economic imaginary, this makes complete sense. Chances are, in different contexts, that's a really extraordinary concept, fungibility. Because actually, everything could be non-fungible. For example, if one of those 10 euro notes had been in David Bowie's pocket, wow, does that change its fungibility? It does. If you could prove that one, I mean, I'd put it in a frame, right? I'd probably auction the damn thing and get more than 10 euros for it, if I could prove it. So associate data suddenly with fungible assets, they quickly become non-fungible. I think is back to that non-strings attached question. How do you change the representative value to suddenly being associated with values? So let's talk about non-fungibility. Conversely, as an example of non-fungibility, if person A lends person B his car or her car, it's not acceptable if person B returns a different car. I mean, it sounds obvious, right? But you take it for granted fungibility, then I think we need to start talking about non-fungibility when it's not appropriate, because we do the appropriate thing all the time. I mean, it might be worth trying it out with mum and dad, boyfriend, girlfriends, friends. Just, oh yeah, you borrowed. I mean, try it later. Can I borrow your phone? Can I borrow something? And just give them something wrong back. See what that breach does. See what they feel like when it's no. And what that means. Anyway, so cars are non-fungible with respect to ownership, but the gasoline that powers the car, interestingly, is fungible. And I could swap a canister of diesel with Kathy and I wouldn't even think twice. But the things it goes in changes. Assets like diamonds, land or baseball cards are not fungible because each unit has unique qualities that add or subtract value. For instance, because individual diamonds have different cuts, colours, sizes and grades, they're not interchangeable. So they cannot be referred to as fungible goods. Real estate is never genuinely fungible. Even on a street of identical houses, each house experiences different levels of noise. Traffic is in varying states of disrepair or repair and has unique views of surrounding areas. So the line between fungibility and non-fungibility may be a very thin one. And I do think, of course, crypto changes that or opens up a design space. Gold is generally considered fungible. I mean, if you take one gold ounce, and is it technically equivalent to another gold ounce? Though in some cases it's not. When otherwise fungible goods are given serial numbers, or rather uniquely identifiable marks, they may no longer be fungible. Adding unique numbers to bars of gold, collectibles, or other items makes it possible to distinguish them. So I hate to say it, but the gold that the Nazis used is very different from the gold that's probably in the Federal Reserves here, because of the data associated with it. So it's a fascinating moment when we think about the economic imaginaries of fungibility and non-fungibility and what data, because that's all it is doing to intervene. So that's why we talk about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, because actually in the art world, and this is, if you get a chance, I can send that one, but I think Bernadine does a great history on this, and I'm kind of scraping bits of hers. We know her well. But there's a great turn because, of course, artists and designers have been distributing pixels as art for a very, very long time. But you and I have been copying and pasting them without with complete fungibility. In fact, almost further than pounds, because I can distribute them and copy and paste them to ad infinitum. But suddenly, if you then want to ask an artist to say, well, hang on, I'd like to be associated with that piece of work, and perhaps if Kathy buys it, I'd like her to have some contractual relationship with it, even though you can still take the JPEG even though you can still copy and screenshot it. But nevertheless, somewhere we said in the chain, in the blockchain, in this register, no, there is evidence to say that it's a contract between two people and the artwork. Just looking back at the history, well, actually, it's been quite interesting watching it. Interesting watching this as research. So you have the Spells of Genesis, which is the first blockchain-based mobile game ever made back in 2015, before the big spike, basically using cards. You imagine the cards being instances on the blockchain as a form of cryptographic, a token, if you like. Later on then, 2016, we see a rare Pepe as being these bizarre little JPEGs being mined and dropped into block 428,909 and then becomes rare scarcity. So you begin to start, the art world starts saying, oh, there is a scarcity because I can associate those JPEGs with that instance. So they begin to start thinking, it's not an NFT in language at that point. CryptoPunks then are published, 10,000 are released, 24 by 24 pixels using a particular standard, which I think came with Ethereum. So that suddenly became a smart contract where you begin to start associating, okay, let's do this for real. And now they're incredibly scarce and incredibly valuable. In the same period, CryptoKitties came along, and actually one of the CryptoKitties was sold for $140,000. So we start seeing a value in the marketplace for this rarity. Bitcoin itself later on hits $19,000. It gets higher, of course, later, but that's quite a big jump for that community. Later on, Homo Pepe sells for $38,000 to begin with, and then again in 2021, $320,000. So humans are weird, right? They'll chase scarce things, but we do chase scarce things because of their non-fungibility. Whether it be your heirlooms, the things in your house, which look mundane to others, but are deeply meaningful for you, they're non-fungible items, which to others, I hate to say it, when you pass, someone is just going to pass it on to someone, and it won't be the value that you associate it with. All the way through to, well, this is interesting, so Christie's and Sotheby's began to run NFT auctions late 2018, so we're starting to see the market turn to this, which is quite, for many of us, is a turn away to start thinking about how you challenge the power of institutions. Although, again, they're going to own that space. And then way off in 2021, Mike Winkleman, who's known as Beeple, sells his artwork for $69 million. All that Mike has done is captured one picture of his life over, I forget whether it's 10 years, but it becomes a unique, rare piece of artwork. But astonishing, $69 million worth of art in one JPEG. So you see this ridiculous escalation. And then you've got the Bored Apes there, when everything goes live and everything sells super quickly, and now they're again worth millions. Is it because people have got too much crypto and it's flying up and they need something to buy? I mean, how do you move crypto if you can't keep moving out? And we know the banks are trying to lock down on what you can flip from one currency to the next. I think this is what's going on. Again, critique my drawing, and I put them on Miro for you to have a play and think about. You also might want to use those diagrams of thinking, how can you design in this design space? If you work in this space, what can you flip from my coffee machine or from NFTs? What else would you put? So really, basically, an artist might put some artwork into what we call the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, no, is that something like that? Which we might call as a permaweb. There's some debate around whether it's truly permanent, but people are supporting, and to an extent, supporting and skimming little bits of the transaction and making sure there is a file system in the internet which is preserved and reserved as a piece of long-term. The long-term might be debatable, but we call it a permaweb. She will then link that and drop the JPEG into the IPFS, and of course make it available then through a block, so then it's relatively permanent and immutable. And then of course someone else might come along, see it. What I haven't done is drawn a link back to the permaweb, because he has a link back to that file now. And his wallet, her wallet, are connected. And whether you want to think about the NFT as being the artwork, it's more likely the token or the certificate, if you like, that actually is the thing that represents the NFT. It's intimately connected to the artwork, but it's funny what you think you own. It's a funny idea, which I also think is interesting. Where is the representation of value? And this is what we did. So we hired Sasha and Cameron, two relatively well-known NFT artists. And I'll just play this. This is...
Our city screen exhibition here, we've got 7 screens along here, which at night look amazing. When it's this bright, it's a bit difficult to see them, but they're going to be displaying the artworks over the course of the month from our 2 artists, and they'll be displaying the artworks that people are minting as NFTs. So we've got some arrows here, some provocations. Will you make a token gesture? Let's follow the arrows down here. Could you own this image? And if you follow the arrows all the way down to the end, then you get to our minting station, where we put the fun, free mints. So we tried to make this as simple as possible. This is where you come to interact with the exhibit. And what we're doing is we're giving you an opportunity to present a colour. The colour feeds into the artwork, and the artists that we work with have creative pieces that respond to the colour that you provide. So you should get a unique piece of art based on the colour that you provide. So it's fairly simple, hopefully, 2-step process. You're going to scan the colour first, camera's there, you've got a screen to help you, and then you're going to see a preview of your artwork on the right-hand side here, and a QR code that you need to scan where you'll be sent further instructions. So let's give this a go. And I told myself I'd bring a colour, so I'm just going to use black. How boring. Back of my phone. So if you present a colour up to the screen here, and it needs to be a consistent colour, that's the challenge. Hold it there for a few seconds, and it should capture. And there you go, on the right-hand side, you've got a preview of the artwork. It tells you at the top there what colour is being captured. And a QR code, which I'm going to scan before the timer at the bottom runs out. So, scan the QR code, and I'm just going to head to the web page that takes me to, and that's going to take you to a sign-up page. Here's a sign-up page. So, sign up and consent, because this is a research project, so we need you to consent to your involvement. Not too much to read there, hopefully, but just punch in your email address down here. I'm going to do that now. And confirm that you're over 18, have read and understand this information, and agree to take part in this research, and click sign up. There you go. You should get a message that says you're all signed up. If you don't, just give it another go. And now we're going to head back inside, where hopefully I'll have an email waiting for me in my inbox with further instructions.
So there's 2 artists who make generative NFTs, but they left out the colour for each generation. So what I'm going to do is, you can't go to Edinburgh, but what I can do is give you a colour. So this is what you're not able to do. In the street, you get a colour, and then you get your straw on which you get the artist, Sasha and Gigi. Truth is, the show is finished, so you've only got till Sunday if you want to register those. What you would do next, though, is you would scan that QR code, and it's going to produce in front of you, hopefully on your phone, the artwork, but it's not an NFT yet. It's just a generative artwork. They're quite beautiful things in different ways, 2 different types. If you want to mint it and put it into the Tezos, so we've picked Tezos as a relatively low carbon blockchain, so it's ethically as close as we could get. If you want it as a mint and own it, you have to then follow the QR code, it will generate the thing, and it will then email you, because it will ask you for your email address. If you follow the email address, you will then get to this screen, which will allow you to mint. And actually,
we are issuing non-transferable
Yeah, two issues. They're not, we made them non-transferable because it's a research project. Edinburgh lawyers wouldn't allow us to make them non-transferable. Now, Kathy knows that means you can't sell them. All right? Because we didn't want to exploit the artists. We also didn't want to go back to the lawyers and say that, someone's used UK research public money to start making a small run of rare collectibles. So Kathy and myself, fuck that then, I'm not scanning them. But they do go into your wallet, and I'll show you mine. So if you scan it, you'll get the email thing, you'll see the artwork. If you like it, follow it down the rabbit hole, and then you'll get to a whole bunch of pages which are around consent. And it's worth reading everything, because if you really want to do it, it's going to ask you to set up a wallet, a Tezos wallet, which actually we'll then pay the gas on, but you'll then have to follow it, and you'll have to develop a seed, which you'll have to write down somewhere and hide under your mattress, because that then becomes your crypto wallet on Tezos, or Tezos chain. So beware. Remember that big thing? If you go down this rabbit hole, but if you do follow it all the way down, then slowly in the end, you'll be given a wallet and be asked to associate it with this particular NFT, and at that moment, you'll be able to mint. And it will take a little while for the blockchain to do its work, so confirm your identity, confirm the artwork, and it will give you an NFT. As I say, they're non-transferable. Now, what it produces is, I mean, this is at night. You've got the two artists. You've got Sasha, who makes this like gorgeous moving shapes. You'll see, I should have taken some videos really. When I did it, there's none of Ginger's, which are more of the architectural, mathematical shapes. So have a go. It feels like a gift, but if you want to do any work for me, have a go at doing that Miro thing and say, tell me what's wrong. I mean, don't worry too much. I think, as I say, I think this is what's going on, but I'd like you to critique it, because I'd like you to say, that made sense to me. No, I'm still unclear what's happening in the permaweb. One thing is, I think I've missed a loop back to the guy owning the gal's artwork. So just to close off then, and I think going back to this idea of non-fungibility, another example is that the Federal Reserve Bank of New York offers gold custody services to central banks and governments around the world. So there might be Lisbon gold in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and it stores these gold bars underground in a vault. All of the gold bars deposited in the vault are then weighed with precision, extraordinary precision, and the refiner and the purity markings on the individual bars are inspected to confirm that they match the depositor's instruction sheets. So already we're talking about this gold not being fungible anymore. All of this is carefully monitored and recorded, and since the exact bars deposited to the New York Fed are the exact ones returned upon withdrawal, those types of gold deposits are not considered fungible. So again, still curious to stay as a creative in this fungible, non-fungible space. And my last thing that we've been playing with then is, how can I change fiat into non-fungible? Can I do that? Now, I think people have been doing this for a long time, because I think mafias wash money. And what they're doing is making arguably non-fungible money, money that might have been taken nefariously, and they wash it clean to make it fungible again. In other words, if I take money out of a system through corruption, or I forge money, the only way I can really make it, because it's non-fungible if it's forgery, it means there's two in the world, and you might be able to spot that mine is a fake. To make it non-fungible, I need to wash it. So I need to pay Kathy 200,000 euros to put into the University of Lisbon. And does it? It's all right. And it'll be washed through this organisation, which isn't much at scale. It's probably a $500 million year organisation. Get it washed out and then suddenly get paid back. That's washing, right? So I'm curious about, can we, as a community, if we think values are important to be associated with value, then can I wash the other way? So here, this is me, and you remember these things. What I did more recently then is I began to put pound coins into my machine here, and I've added the hashtag clean energy. So I washed them with the hashtag clean energy, and I've just been giving out pound coins. But every time I give away a pound coin, I say, this pound coin can only be spent on non-carbon based commodities. And people go, well, and I show them the machine, and we put them through the machine, and they even put their own money in the machine. and suddenly I'm trying to wash it the other way. So this, I think, ultimately, thinking of the footnotes then, if you change the representation of value, can it change the values that you represent? And is that a design project? Because with the climate crisis approaching, we might have to seriously start doing this. All of our pensions, all of our bank accounts probably need to start getting out of a truly fungible space into a relatively non-fungible space, which is there are strings attached, and it's called 1.5 degrees, or not exceeding it. So I like that as a design provocation now. Take the picture. No. So therefore, this is question 2. Is it likely that all digital representations of value then will have data that limits its fungibility? Is that, 50 years' time, is that just the truth that there will be nothing that will be truly fungible? That actually all currencies are going to have, in the end, if we're going to deal with some of the social justice and the environmental challenges, that we have to talk about non-fungibility. We have to move away. Is it that your kids, the next generation, won't know what it was like to have complete fungibility? How does a smart contract data change our interest in designing fungible and non-fungible representation of value? Is that the design space, the smart contract? And then if smart data and smart contracts are connected, is it the case that we will always have traceable coins, traceable oil, traceable food, traceable education? At what point do you begin to bind things? Or is it a ridiculous project, which means we're going to spend vast amounts of energy tracing everything, which is also carbon crackers as well? Anyway, remember what you want to do, though. I do think it's about the services at the end. And if you can think about your economic imaginary and dismantle, or go through, as Kathy says, the idea of blockchain, just move through it as a thinking, a thought project, get through it and see how it changes the way that you assume people on planet Earth get the things that nourish them, but without perhaps thinking of the constraints of a fiat currency. But there is a warning, just be careful. Thanks very much. Sorry, I went on a bit, but it was, I thought 90 minutes and then... I'll stop sharing that as well, just to see people here. Any thoughts? Did it make sense? You see what we're trying to do with this? Is the Edinburgh piece on the project.